everyone, welcome to the Anglia Plane Modeler YouTube channel. This edition will be a full build review and process on the Mustang P-51D Mustang Academy kit in 1/72 scale, which I picked up from my local hobbycraft store for £9. I picked this one up because I'd never done a bare metal finish before, so I wanted to do some experimenting for a bigger project I'm doing later on in the year, next year rather. And I wanted to see which paints looked best and what kind of effects you could get from them. So this is the kit. There's just a couple of sprues. It looks really simple. It wasn't that simple, to be honest with you, but it looks quite simple from this unboxing. So sprue A and B. Details are quite good actually. There's some nice fastener details in there, some wiring in the cockpit, but I did want to add a few little bits to it myself, which I'll show you in a little bit. So A and B, and then the clear parts, one of those hoods you don't need, just the front canopy and then the hood. Pretty good. And then decal sheet. I didn't want to use, I'll show you a bit later, but I've created some masks as my first video showed on my cricket machine, so I could spray those on. Bought a few extra bits, just some wheels from Res Kit, and this photo etch kit from Edward, although it's completely the wrong kit. It's for a B/C Mustang as opposed to this D model. I thought they're in the same product line or tree. It's the same model, but it's not. It's totally different. So I could only use a couple of the parts there, which I'll show you. A couple of warning labels, not to stab yourself while you're making it, and then the instructions. There's only 8 steps to this. It looks quite simple, but each step has like 7 or 8 different things to do, so it's not quite as simple as that. And then painting guide for this scheme, which is the down for double Mustang, and then this is my sheet with the insignia mask. I'm not sure if you can see that from it, but I had a go at doing the real small stuff, but it didn't work, so I ended up using the decals. So I'm just going to add a few details, some of the rivet lines that I've seen on new ones. You can't really see them in great detail, because I think on the Mustang they were actually filled and polished to make it more slippery, but you can still see them, and with a metal finish you can see everything I've discovered underneath. So actually adding some details like this, even though they're subtle, you can still see it through the paintwork, so I thought it was worth adding it on. So I just cut the wing off the sprue, top side, sand down the little nibs as you always do, and with some Tamiya sanding sponge, and then using a blueprint which I found on the internet, I just pick out the more prominent ones that I want to use a ruler to make sure they're evenly spaced. So in this case, this scale worked out at 0.5mm lines in this case. I mark them on with a pencil and then draw the line, and then I know what to follow. With this bigger rivet wheel, this is from Galaxy, which is a different one to the one I used previously, you can, because it's a bigger wheel, you can use a ruler to hold the line, and then you can press the rivet wheel along the ruler. Whereas the smaller wheels, you end up, the line just gets pushed by the little where the centre nut is. You can't really use it, you have to follow the line. But for longer lines, I think this bigger wheel would be better, because I can keep it straight by using the wheel like this. You just don't press too hard, otherwise it might slip and away it goes. So you draw the line, and then use your rivet wheel. You can do a couple of passes as long as you don't lift off, otherwise the holes will be punctured in a different place. And then just repeat. I'll do the horizontal ones, vertical ones, sorry, then horizontal ones after. And then once you've done that, you give it a sand, smooth down, and then I use just the Tamiya panel line enamels just to see how it's come out. And then onto the build. So cockpit, just doing the control stick there first. This all fitted quite nicely. Just used Tamiya extra fin there to do it. And then with the seat, I'm going to use the seat belts from the Edward pack. So I quite like these ones. So to do that, they have got some detail in there already. So if you have a really steady hand and you like doing the hand painting, you could just paint the detail as you can see. But I'm just going to use my little chisel here to try and make the seats as smooth as possible, and then I'll put the photo etch parts on top of that. The plastic's quite soft, but it doesn't take too much pressure to lift off the main bulk of it. I prefer the photo etch parts. I just think they look good. And I also like the 3D decals you can get, but I couldn't find for this scale and for this kit. I'll choose the photo etch one instead. So once you've got the main bit of plastic off, I then just use like a jeweler's metal file to smooth it down as much as possible, get the bigger chunks off, and then I move on to using the sanding sponges to get it. In the sanding sponges, I've got 400, 600, 800, and then work your way up. So, and then onto I think these are like radio boxes, communications boxes that sit behind the seat. So they just come in two parts. Just join them together, and then where the join is, just give those a little sand as well. And then there are some extra little details like this. I think this is possibly the oxygen hose. I'm not really sure, but it's quite nice that you get some extra parts for this bit. However, this is definitely positioned where it's supposed to be according to the instructions, but it means when you fit the cockpit floor and dash and everything, it's kind of in the way. So there's a bit of jigging about to get it to fit, and then some more little details there to add on. Once I've got the main parts assembled for the internal bits, I've then primed and mist the surface of black to give a smooth finish, and then I'm using Mr. Hobby, or Mr. Colour rather, REF/USAF interior green, which I know the US ones are slightly different colour, but I think it's quite a good match from what I'm saying. And then I've used a new technique for me, which I think is quite a simple technique. Other people is just dry brushing. So once it's all green, the green is all dry and the black's all dried, I then dip my wire brush in some flat aluminium, Tamiya one, wipe off most of it onto a kitchen towel there, so you've just literally left with a dry brush, and then just brush back and forward over the raised bits, which then give you like a metallic edge, just simulates a bit of wear and tear, but also brings out some of those details as well. So I used it on the radio boxes. I went a bit overkill there, I didn't wipe enough off, but then I've also used it on the internal parts as well. I'm really happy with that. It's very, very straightforward, but it brings out the details really nicely. And I guess you could use lots of different colours if you're just trying to pick out different bits which are made from different materials. So I was really happy with that. The dashes, or dials rather, I used the photo etch part, and then I used crystal clear underneath to glue it on, which then gives you like a shine for the dials underneath. So it dries clear. And then I've been using this gloss paint as well to give it a little gloss coat. And then once that's all dry, I've made an oil wash, which is just a dark brown oil wash, which I think works well with the green. And then it's time to assemble everything. So So dry fitting all this first. So the fit is all right. You'll see in a second the top part, once you get the locator tabs lined up of the cockpit seat, it will fit together nicely there. Underneath, even though everything's in the right tab, in the little pins, it doesn't quite line up. So there's a bit of sanding and filling to do, but overall it's not too bad, considering that it's obviously primed painted gloss, which obviously adds a tiny bit of thickness to the side. So once I was happy with where it's supposed to go, I held it in place and then just the extra thin glue to then rub it all together. And then glued it all up, used some tape to hold it into position, and then ran along all the seam lines with the extra thin, try and squidge them gaps together. You see at the bottom there, it's not quite lined up, so there's a little bit of filing down and sanding, filing some more to get that a bit neater. But overall, it's pretty good. And then you glue the top and the bottom parts of the wings together, and then you glue the rest of it, so the rear tail section's going on. They went together pretty good. And then I'm going to use this black base from AK Extreme Metal, because when you're doing a metallic finish, the shinier the surface underneath, the glossier surface, the better. So I primed it all in Mr. Surfacer, which I think was a 1200, to fill in some of the gaps and scratches and things. And then once I was happy with that, I went over it, the middle bit, the seams in the centre fuselage section there, with the Mr. Surfacer 1500, just to have a look at the seam lines. And then once I was happy with all that, and then going over it, effectively priming it again with the black base, which is really, really shiny, it shows up absolutely everything. Those flaps there were nightmare, so I've put them in the sort of semi-down position, but the gaps were horrific. It just didn't fit the way they fitted on the Orf, and I've seen that from other people's reviews, so I wasn't happy with it. So I ended up refilling it in, sanding it down, filling it, sanding it, and eventually I've got to something like that, which is not too bad. So once the glossy kind of black base has dried, it turned out pretty good actually, and then I've gone over it, I've started to paint it with the bare metal finish. So AK do a really good one, and I did use that later, the aluminium paint, and you can use it straight from the bottle through your airbrush. But I also tried Mr. Metal colour, I think it's super metallic, and I just preferred it, although they're very, very similar, but they really go on really smooth. I also tried the Tamiya flat aluminium, but it's not anywhere near as good. It's not as shiny. It's quite dull. It looks a bit grey. But this needed I did a couple of coats, but overall I was really happy with it. I like how shiny it is straight away, and then it doesn't, when it dries, it just stays glossy. I guess because you've got the nice glossy base underneath. And you can see it's picking out some of the details. I had to rescribe quite a few of these because of the goings on with those flaps there. Because I've sanded it so many times, it took away quite a lot of the details. So I used my rescriber to add the panel lines back in, but it turned out okay in the end. Just onto the side sections now of the main body. Try and get nice and close in these ones to prevent it from kind of drying out before it hits the model. and creates a bit of a grainy surface. But this one, it can go on quite wet because we're doing the weathering with the oils later, rather than kind of pre or post shading. I do a bit of post shading, but it's mainly separate panels rather than in the individual bits. But for a first time go at metal paintwork, I was quite happy with that. So then the nose has an anti-glare panel, which I'm pretty sure, well, as per the instructions, is flat olive drab, matte olive drab. So that's what I've used. I see some pictures have black, but I've gone for the olive drab. That's what most of the reference photos are. You can see where I also messed up a little bit in the front there, rescribing. I went a bit wonky, so I filled it and sanded it back and filled it again. That's why that's a different colour. But it turned out okay. I also decided to stick on the front canopy section. I'm going to have the hood slid back a bit, so that's why that's covered up. And then once I was happy with all the paintwork drying off, I then went on to doing the insignias. So this is the first time doing this as well. So with this, I created the masks, which I've again shown you in the previous video. And then first off, you have to unstick or peel off the outer kind of shell of it. Someone's pointed out that you can just use transfer tape for this, which I will use later. It makes everything all lined up properly. So the first bit there is going to be the blue background. So that's the shape we need. So I've masked off the rest of the wing. I'm doing the underside one first. There's one on the underside. In hindsight, I'd go over in light coats so it doesn't bleed through. I think everything's better with lots of lighter coats rather than any heavy thick coats, but I didn't want it to bleed underneath the mask and run along one of the panel lines or something. So instead, lots of thin light coats. I've just used flat blue for this, Tammy's flat blue, which I think sprays on really nicely. So I've done a couple of coats of that. Then you pop over the internal mask, or the mask for the white part, and again I've used Tamiya flat white for that. It's hard to get this lined up, which again I think is where transfer tape is better. You can get it exactly lined up, but you can with these. Now confidence has grown a little bit. If you unstick it and it's not quite in the right section, there is usually a way to fix it, to remask it, add a bit here and there if you need to, which is what I did in fairness to this one. So once you're happy with that, let it dry for a little bit, and then the best bit, then masking. I was pretty happy with that, but it's not quite lined up. You can see the bottom bit of the white is different, so I did change that in the end. Then there's a couple of panels there that are a slightly different shade. I think they're kind of more accessy panels, and then this side here I think was actually made from steel rather than aluminium for heat resistance wrapping sort of. So I've got a darker metal shade, which I've sprayed on the side there, and then a slightly lighter shade for those bits on the wings, just to create some tonal difference. And then it's onto the little parts, so the canopy, painting that in the same metal finish, and then those two little bits there are the rear tail wheel, the flaps that open. I did them separate. These are the wheels from ResKit. They're brilliant because the hubs come in separate bits, so you can paint them first, and then they just glue them in. You don't have to worry about masking the metal bits for the tyre. And that's that. Pretty good. There's some more detail in those than the standard ones as well, and they're quite cheap. Then onto the prop. So I painted it in flat black, and then masked off for the yellow. So I used flat yellow for that. Some people would prime that in white and then do the yellow to make it pop a bit more, but I'm going for a dirty, more weathered look, so I didn't want it too bright, so I'm happy just using the black primer and then just having a few passes on it. The yellow always is quite difficult to spray over black, or I find it is anyway. So you have to do loads of thin coats and let it dry in between, otherwise it ends up just pooling up and doesn't look good. Okay, just unmasking those bits, so I was quite happy with that. It did come with some decals to put on the prop, but they were just blobs of blue in the end. They didn't look good at all, so I left them off in the end. And this one had a white nose, so I painted that in white. Then onto the remaining decals, so you can see I've sprayed the insignias on the top as well, and the side, and the C at the back on the red section of the tail, and also the WRF serial number. So this is my process for the decals, which I'm sure similar to everybody else's. So I use Micro's set, and I just apply a little bit of that over the area that I'm going to put the decal on. So this one is going to be the down for double name of the aircraft. And then you just use normal process, so put it in some lukewarm water until it starts to slide. Pop it on, use a cotton bud to try and get as much moisture or air out as underneath to prevent silvering. It's a nice shiny smooth surface, so because I've glossed it obviously after I've painted it, so they've gone on really nice actually. It's a big plus for this kit, so the decals are really good. And just adding, there's quite a few nice little ones on here. This is a deck of cards in there. Down a little bit. And then to make it melt into the lines and get rid of any kind of raised bits, I just use Micro Sol with a real tiny paintbrush, paint it over, and then I just leave it for about half an hour. These ones went on really well anyway, so I didn't really. You can leave it longer, maybe some people leave it overnight, but I had a bit of a disaster a few models ago where I left it overnight, and I think some of it dripped down and pooled at the bottom and melted some of the paint. So I learnt a lesson with that one, so I leave it on there and then wipe it off. And then another gloss coat, and then I'm on to some oils. So someone said for metal finishes this Payne's grey, which is like a bluey grey, might be a good wash for it. But I didn't like it that much. It wasn't really the look I was going for. I think they're probably better for more modern fighter jets maybe, or like grey aeroplanes, not sure. But anyway, this is the process that I use to create washes, which is really straightforward. I just use the thinner, some odourless thinners. This is a matte effect one, and then a dab of the oil paint on some cardboard to absorb some of the oils off. Really small amount, so just like a little drop of it, and then give it a good mix up, and then that's the wash. So you really don't need hardly any of the oil on there. And then I brush it all over the model, let it dry for a good sort of half an hour, 45 minutes, and then with a kitchen towel with some thinners on it, dabbed off so it's just lightly applied, and then wipe it off the model so it just stays in the detailed parts, the raised bits or the recessed bits. And that's it, that's how I do it. And then you can go over it again with a different colour, or you can highlight certain areas, like I went over the exhaust with a different one. This is my little test wing. You can see the 3 different metal shades that I tried, and then I was just testing out this blue grey. It looks very blue there. but it wasn't really what I was after. So you can see the pots in my little palette thing there. I've got the different colours, and I'm just going over the wheels with a dark dirt wash or dark brown wash, because this one was based on a UK airfield, which was probably quite muddy at some point. The landing gear got a coat of that, and then once that's dry, you just wipe it off, and then did the same with the plane. In the end I did I think it was like a burnt sienna, I think it's called, with a smoke and then a black, mixed it up, and that was it. And then you just glue all the bits together, and this is the end product. So I was really happy with it, to be honest, considering that it was a budget kit. Bought the wrong accessories for it and never done a metal finish before, so I was really happy with it. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like and subscribe. My next kit is going to be a Mosquito. Thank you again for watching.